Brian Pedersen, college football featured writer from Bleacher Report, joining us on the Menard Studio Hotline. It's Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville 105.3. Let's get into the final rankings yesterday. Clemson 1, Alabama 2, Michigan State jumps into that third spot, and Oklahoma falls to 4. Your thoughts on Michigan State jumping ahead to Oklahoma? Jumping over Oklahoma, I should say.
I expected that. I'm not surprised at all. It works out logistically. The committee can say that the 13th game was enough to boost Michigan State from 4 to 3 ahead of Oklahoma. It also prevents any sort of issues with having Oklahoma as a lower-seeded team playing in the Cotton Bowl against number 2 Alabama and having a more home field advantage because it is an area that they are more familiar with and they have more fans. Putting them in Florida against Clemson, it takes that away, so we have the matchups that work in that regard. I don't think it was done to avoid having Oklahoma and Alabama play. I think it was more a matter of from the logistical standpoint.
UNC Clemson, the way that game finished, is this just another kind of black eye on the ACC officiating, or do we always look at this game and go, yeah, but what if, which is, I would think, the thing you want to avoid at this time of the year?
There would be too many other things that would have still had to happen. It was unfair that UNC did not get the opportunity to try and get that last score, but they would have had to score a touchdown in a minute and get the 2-point conversion just to be able to get to overtime. It does stink. I don't think it's specifically an ACC issue, though they did have a bunch this year. The Big 12 had problems. The Big 10 had problems. The Big 10 allowed a touchdown on a play where a guy clearly ran out of bounds on his own, but they said otherwise. These problems are going to happen as long as you have humans doing the officiating. And I heard a bunch of people say, well, you should be able to review offsides. You should be able, if we are reviewing every single play, and it's just going to make the games even longer. They're already almost 4 hours to begin with. I think you just kind of have to accept that there are going to be some mess-ups from time to time.
When you watch that, and I think from my money and from my perspective, the best championship game of the entire weekend was that Michigan State-Iowa game. I think hands down. I don't think there's any question about it personally. Is Iowa a better team than I think people gave them credit for?
Yes. They played that game exactly how they've played most of their games. Do just enough to be able to be ahead and be in every game with a strong defense and just enough offensive weapons. They were playing a very, very good Michigan State team that had faced a much tougher schedule, and they had them until 27 seconds left. It took a historic drive, 22 plays, 82 yards, 9 minutes and 4 seconds. That's the kind of stuff you usually only see in high school football when teams are running the wishbone. I've seen that here in high school in Tucson. I once saw a 17-play, 38-yard drive, if you can believe that. So, yeah, but for Michigan State to be able to pull out, Iowa just didn't have enough at the end, and I'm glad to see that they finished high enough in the rankings and that they're going to be getting that great game playing in the Rose Bowl for the first time in 25 years. It's better that they got to go because they were a division champion than sending Ohio State. And then it gives us a great matchup of Ohio State against Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl.
It's Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville 105.3 and online, ESPNEvansville.com. College football featured writer Brian Pedersen joining us on the Menards Studio Hotline. Well, let's take a look, Brian, at those two semifinal matchups between Clemson, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Michigan State there as we get into that part of the season here. I think Clemson Oklahoma's favored over Clemson, if I'm not mistaken, and I think
the slight favorite, yeah.
Slight favorite.
And that line's going to move around. We've got a couple weeks before that game.
Yeah. How do you see, both those games playing out? I know we're weeks away from this, and things could change, I guess, between now and then, barring any unforeseen injuries or something in a practice. But who do you like it to move on and play for a national championship?
I actually think Clemson is the team that will make through. I'm picking Clemson to win the whole thing. It's not going to be easy, but I have just liked the way that they have been all year. And Deshaun Watson, if I was picking Heisman, he's the guy I would go with if I had a vote. I just love the way he has performed this year. We got to see what he was really capable of last year. He looked great, and then he got hurt, so we didn't have the full Deshaun Watson. He's just been amazing with his vision down the field. The ability to run lately has been spectacular with all these 100-yard games he's had and all these 400-yard total offense games. Baker Mayfield's doing pretty much the same thing over at Oklahoma, and he's been amazing as well. But I think this is just Clemson's year.
Well, you bring up the agile quarterbacks. That's where Alabama seems to run into trouble when they play teams that have kind of a dual threat quarterback or one that can run around a little bit. That seems to be the Achilles heel, if there is one in an Alabama defense, is a mobile quarterback. Do you see, well, you've taken Clemson, obviously. Do you think it will be Clemson and Alabama in that title game, or does Michigan State?
I do, because I think Alabama got a great matchup against Michigan State, because Michigan State is a very pro-style, old-school kind of football team that they don't do anything too flashy, and those are the teams that Alabama has traditionally been able to dominate during the playoffs, during the postseason, during the regular season. As you said, yes, the spread-type offenses have given them more trouble. So they've gotten better against that. Because the last 2 years against Dak Prescott with Mississippi State, which was probably the most significant spread guy they faced in the SEC, they were able to hold him down and keep him from being able to run very much. Last year, it's almost like they didn't know that Cardale Jones could run the ball and that affected them in the Sugar Bowl against Ohio State. But otherwise, they've been improving against that type of thing. But when it comes to the smash-mouth, just straightforward pro-style offenses, they dominate.
I know you mentioned, obviously, Ohio State, Notre Dame, which I agree. I think Iowa earned the right to go to the Rose Bowl and play Stanford. And I think that game, watching what I saw from them in the Big Ten Championship against Michigan State on Saturday, I do think that Rose Bowl's got the potential to be a very, very good football game. And you mentioned Ohio State, Notre Dame as being a good matchup as well, and I'm with you on that one. I think that's got the potential to be a good bowl game. What about some of these other New Year's Six games that are out there now? Which one, when you see these matchups, that you go, oh, that'll be one worth watching?
I'm very interested to see the Houston-Florida State Peach Bowl game. I guess that would maybe be the least of the 6 games, but because it has the non-Power 5 team in Houston in there against Florida State team that didn't even win its own division in the ACC. But I'm interested to see how that works out, because Greg Ward, the quarterback at Houston, has been so fun to watch this year with 35 total touchdowns, 19 rushing touchdowns. He's essentially a less heralded version of what J.T. Barrett was last year under the same guy, Tom Herman, who was the Ohio State offensive coordinator. I want to see what Herman and Houston and Ward can do against Florida State, which is, their offense hasn't been there all year, but the defense has been strong. And that's where they've got a lot of pros on that side of the ball, and I want to see what kind of game plan they would have against Ward and see how they could handle him, because they were not able to shut down Deshaun Watson when they played it back in November.
We were talking last week. We talked about some of the coaching changes that Georgia at that time, when we spoke to you last week, had just fired Mark Richt. That was before he made the move to Miami. How do you think he fits in that role as the head coach of Miami? Can he bring them back to a national prominence down in South Beach?
Well, I think he's already started in that vein, because he's giving them a name that they hadn't had in a while. So it's going to at least get them some attention besides empty seats in the stadium and booster scandals and whatnot. It should create a nice boost right away in recruiting, fundraising, all those kind of things, making the boosters happy down there. He just has to be able to get past the knock of not being able to win big games. But the thing is, Miami hasn't really had very many big games in the last 5, even 10 years. So they're in a better position. The problem is that the ACC Coastal has suddenly become one of the best divisions in the country when it comes to coaching. You had Justin Fuente from Memphis going over to Virginia Tech, Virginia adding Bronco Mendenhall from BYU, which was the biggest surprise of any coaching move I saw this offseason. And suddenly that division is no chopped liver. It used to be that the ACC Coastal, it was a wonder if each year maybe they were going to have all 7 teams go 4-4 because they were all mediocre. Now also with North Carolina in there, even Duke is still good. They're all good in that division.
What about Will Muschamp to South Carolina, which seems to be, I don't know if it's a done deal, but that seems to be where it's heading.
He's been introduced, so that's in the running.
Okay,
it was a crazy situation, and we were dealing with it a lot out here in Tucson, because Arizona's Rich Rodriguez was another name that kept popping up. And then on Saturday night, both he and the athletic director at Arizona went to Twitter and basically said, yeah, they offered me the job, but I'm staying at Arizona. South Carolina is saying, no, we never offered him the job. So essentially they're saying we just flew him across the country to talk to him, but never actually offered him the job. Depending on who you want to believe, I'm not a big fan of the Will Muschamp hire because he really didn't manage to do much at Florida. He has to figure out how to have a better offense. He brought in Kurt Roper, who was his offensive coordinator the last year at Florida, and they were pathetic on offense. So I don't see how anybody at South Carolina can really be excited about that hire. The SEC East, take away Mark Richt, he's gone. They brought in all the new coaches are all either first-time head coaches or former defensive coordinators, with the exception of Butch Jones at Tennessee. It's set up for Tennessee if they don't win the division next year. Butch Jones isn't doing it right.
That's Brian Pedersen, college football featured writer from Bleacher Report. You can find him on Twitter at RealBJP. Enjoy the games, and we'll talk again sometime soon down the road, okay?
Thank you. Hey, we're only 12 days away from the Cure Bowl between Georgia State and San Jose State. That should be a whopper of a game.
I'll set my DVR, sir.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Brian.